It's been a bit since we heard from the React team, in particular about new features and things they're building. That changed today with an update from React Labs. This is where they showcase all the cool experimental stuff they're working on. Most of it makes it into React, some of it doesn't. What matters isn't whether or not it's going to make it, it's what they're working on and how relevant it is. If you're tired of the server component stuff, I get it. None of this is server components. This is really useful stuff for all React developers. From an overhaul of everything to do with animations and transitions, there's so much cool stuff there, to an IDE extension. Yes, the React team is shipping an extension for VS Code now. So cool. They're shipping fast, and there's a lot to cover here. But we're shipping too, and I need to pay my team. So a quick word from today's sponsor, then we're going to dive right in. Today's sponsor is a bit different because it's a company that sponsored me before. You've seen them, but it's also a product you might not have seen before because I bullied them into making it. Yes, really. I convinced Convex to make their own AI app builder, and I'm so happy I did because it can do things I didn't think AI app builders could do at all. I have a whole dedicated video on it if you want to check it out, but to just give you the highlights, here's a Slack clone that it built. This Slack clone has fully working auth channels that you can create the way you would in traditional Slack test channel. Oh, I mistyped it. If I go here, I can send a message. I can create a second preview environment, sign in anonymously there, and see whenever I send a message, it automatically appears in the other preview. What's even cooler though, the database tab. We hop in here, I go to the messages. I can go to this hey message, change it to what's good, and just changing it in the database updates it in the UI because you're still getting all the benefits of Convex, the ability to automatically live sync whenever a change happens somewhere, goes everywhere else. You can run real server-side code. You can set up auth with literally 3 lines of code, add file upload, and all these other annoying things that normally take forever to do. It just does. So how long did it take for me to get this built? Believe it or not, this was a one-shot. Yes, literally one prompt got to generate all of this. No issues. It took a minute or so to build it, and it has a fully working backend and a deploy button that you can one-click and ship this production-ready app backend to frontend. I'm not exaggerating when I say Chef is the only AI app builder I have ever used that actually understands backend and builds it in a way I would comfortably ship. Every other one of these tools is a mess of integrations, and I usually use them to generate a nice front end and then exit and go build the backend myself. Holy hell, it is so cool to finally have a platform that I don't need to do the backend myself for. It does it right, and the reason it does it right is because Convex has one of the best backend as a service solutions for writing code and having it just work. So if you want to build an actual app with an AI app builder, Chef's the only one I can recommend. Check it out today at soydev.link/chef. I'm fighting the urge to skip to the extension. I'll understand if you fast forward to that part of the video, but there's a lot of important things we need to talk about here. As of today, the React experimental branch now has view transitions and activity. I've been waiting for this for so long. If you're not familiar with view transitions, it might be because you're on a Firefox-based browser, and that means that they don't work in your browser. One of my favorite sites to showcase them is Naman's blog. Naman is an engineer that used to work at Meta. He's now at OpenAI. He built some crazy style stuff, specifically StyleX, to power most of Meta's styling. His blog is an incredible showcase of view transitions if you're using a browser that isn't Firefox-based, like I am right now. So let's hop over to a Chrome-based browser. And now when I go to different pages, you see the animation there, how the Naman moved to the top? That wasn't some crazy JavaScript and CSS doing that. That was view transitions, a browser API where you can tell the browser, hey, this element might still exist on the next page. If it does, animate it on its way there. And now when I click the title for this blog post, did you see how cool that is? That is so awesome. The view transition is on navigation. If an element moves or changes, it lets you define the way the element moves and changes. And that's why this all looks so cool. And it's not particularly hard to do. If we go to my blog, I can show you what this looks like. So I'll click a random post. And this still has a nice fancy little animation. It doesn't move anything around because there isn't really anything for it to move around. But that animation was so simple to add. It's also worth noting that that site has 0 JS on it. It's entirely Astro. I think it might have a tiny little router in order to trigger some things, but the code for that, hilariously simple. Blog index view transitions from Astro transitions. And if we find the view transitions component, it's just in the head because it's just mounting some JS. And then from there, all I have to do if I want to move something from one page to another is tag it to identify it. You can literally just add this CSS snippet, and now the navigation between different routes on your app's going to feel significantly better. It's so cool. You can do crazy stuff with it, but it's not just for navigation. You can also trigger view transitions, update the DOM, and then the animations will happen, which works great for single page apps. Here's an example with cards that when you delete them, there's an animation for them to leave, which is one of the hardest things to do in the browser. Because when you remove something from the DOM, it's not there. You can't animate it anymore. But if it's a view transition, all of a sudden you can animate it. You can do things to it because the removal of the thing from the DOM is now an event that occurs that you could do things with. As long as you're not targeting Firefox. Hopefully it catches up in the near future. React now supports view transitions, which I am so hyped for. No more crazy chaotic libraries just to make something fade out when you click delete. To opt in to animating an element, wrap it in the new view transition component. The component lets you declaratively define what to animate when an animation is activated. You can define when to animate by using one of the 3 triggers for a view transition. You can call start transition, you can call deferred, or you can use suspense. And all of these things now will trigger transitions, which is so cool. By default, they're using the default CSS animations for view transitions, which is a smooth crossfade, but you can use the view transition pseudo selectors to define how the animation runs. So here we have view transition old, star, animation 300, fade out, and then new, fade in. When the DOM updates due to an animation trigger, like start transition, use deferred value, or a suspense fallback switching to content, React will now use declarative heuristics to automatically determine which view transitions should actually be activated for this animation. So it's using the DOM, the virtual DOM specifically, to see which things wrapped in which transitions changed between those states and triggers the animations for those at that point. What's cool with the feature like this is I'm sure under the hood, there is a ton of work, and this is really complex to build into React this way. But when you work with it, it just feels like a native browser API, because it is. React had to change a bunch of things to let it play that nice with the native browser APIs, but they did it, and it works, and it's great. Yep, there we go. See that nice fade? You click, and the thing doesn't just switch. It doesn't just instantly go to the next content. It fades to the next page. And you did this by very simply wrapping view transition around the main body component. URL is /, then we do home. Otherwise, we render details. That's it. That's the complexity of adding view transitions to your app. Wrap a thing in your VDOM that can transform and change, and now it will transition between the elements. I am so excited to add this to T3 chat. You guys have no idea. I hate animations normally, but this is the right way to do it. There's a good call out here about where to place the view transitions. There's some complexity to it, similar to where to place suspense wrappers. But this is much easier to figure out than suspense wrappers because you'll see your app transitioning wrong if you navigate in a way where you put the view transition in the wrong place. Thankfully, there's a default none you can add to any given view transition so that you can customize it conditionally instead. Very good stuff to see. You can also set a given string name for the view transition and then target that through CSS. So good. And now with that change, the crossfade is slower. Yes, that takes a lot longer to run now because they added the animation CSS, bumping it to 500. Can I change this? Can I change it to 50? You can, and that works. That's so cool. 50 is a little too low to see. I'm going to do 150 so you can get a little bit. Ooh, I actually quite like that. It's subtle, but it makes the switch not as jarring. Honestly, on a video at 30 FPS is going to be hard to see. The link's in the description if you want to go play with all this. It's pretty cool. If it was just transitioning the content of the page, it'd be one thing, but where view transitions get really cool is shared elements, similar to what we saw in Naman's blog, where the title moves somewhere else because the element is still there. It's just a different place on the page. And with view transitions, you can do this too. You give one a unique name. I don't love name for this. I think it should be identifier or ID or something. So that's what this is. But now that we've established that this view transition is for something with this identifier, if the next view also has the same identifier, I'll show you the results because it's so cool. Watch what happens now when I click a video. Tell me that's not the coolest shit. Do you know how annoying it was to write code to do this before? Do you know how annoying it was to have an element move when you navigate? Here is all the code you have to write for that now. We have the thumbnail component that has a view transition wrapping it with an identifier. We have video controls in video, and video uses the thumbnail component. And we have the list view, which also uses the same thumbnail component. Now, the identifier is always the same. There's no custom JS being written. There is just a wrapper component with an ID. And that's all it takes to get awesome transitions like this in your apps now. It's so cool. And it handles like very different things too. Like here where the video is roughly the same height, it does the right thing and subtly expands to fill the space. But if you click one near the bottom, it moves up too, which is not easy to set up. I'm so happy with this. It looks so cool. By default, React will automatically generate a unique name for each element activated for a transition. When React sees a transition where a view transition with a name is removed and a new view transition with the same name is added, it will activate a shared element transition. They even have causes for animations so that you can control the type of transition. So if you want a different transition for navigating forward or backwards, you can call the add transition type helper and then have different cases here. So with share, on nav forward, we want to slide forward, but on back, we want to slide back. Now we'll have different animations depending on which transition type we triggered. And then obviously we can go apply that with the view transition target in CSS. Old is for the state of things before the transition and new is for the state after. You can target a specific class of a share here with a given identifier like that. It's so simple. And this is just in CSS. Like we're using actual browser standards to do all of this. And I'm so thankful that instead of the React team building some crazy new animation system, they leaned so heavily into browser standards instead. And now with that change, you can see the top nav slide to the left when we go to a thing and then slide to the right when we leave it. It's so cool. It's so cool this is this easy now. As long as you're on a browser that supports them like Safari or Chrome, but yeah, Firefox, get your shit together. Animating suspense boundaries. As they mentioned before, suspense will also activate view transitions, which is so cool. So if you have a fallback for something before the content comes in, now you can animate it. You just wrap the suspense in a view transition. And now when we do a thing, like go to this, we get that fancy animation with the placeholder and then the content. And it even stays rendered because of how suspense works. But look at that. Do you see how simple but nice that little animation is? And they don't have to put a lot of work into it either. There's CSS. You just add the new keyframes and it works. It's so cool. It's so cool. I am really hyped about this stuff. You can also provide custom animations using an exit on the fallback and enter on the content. So here you can specify on exit you want it to slide down and on enter you want it to slide up. You write the CSS and now it will handle those two different cases. And if we once again play with the sandbox, see the content slid up. So cool. And the exit is the fade goes down, like the weird fade gray out when we're waiting for the loading goes down, and then the new content goes up to replace it. You can also use view transitions to animate lists of items as they reorder. Ah, so good. You just put a key in the same way you always do with a list in React. So let's type in third. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? I didn't even know about that. That's so cool. Like nothing special being written here. This isn't some crazy JS code to handle things being removed from the list. We just added a single view transition wrapper to the video component. And now as we filter using the deferred value helper here so that it can hook in at the right time, that's it. That's it. I finally am seeing the value of deferred value here. We pass search text to this component. It uses whatever it was before on the first render. And then when it changes, it now knows the change is coming. So it triggers the view transition. It then renders the new state and transitions to that. It's so good. But this deferred value wrapper here tells React, hey, when this value changes, you now have two states. You have the deferred version and you have the new version. Go trigger your transitions. That's it. It's literally a 2-line of code change to add something that used to take a PhD in browser performance chaos and also screwing up the way your code base works too. It's so good. I'm so hyped on this. This was Seb Markbridge's like baby, which is crazy because he's the server components guy, but he just really wanted to make view transitions happen and he went ham to do it. I'm pumped for them. This is such a cool thing. And if that was all they were talking about here, I'd be hyped, but it goes way further. So we need to talk about activity. In past updates, we shared that we were researching an API that would allow for components to be visually hidden and deprioritized, preserving UI state with reduced performance costs relative to unmounting or hiding with CSS. I have done so many hacks for this in the past. The level of depth I've went to with portals just to keep an element's state around when it was being removed from the DOM is obnoxious. Now there's a built-in component for it. Activity is a new component to hide and show parts of the UI. When an activity is visible, it's rendered as normal. When it is hidden, it's unmounted, but it will still save its state and continue to render at a lower priority than anything visible on the screen. Do you know how useful this is? Now, if you have an input box and you switch to a different place in the UI, you go to a different page and you go back, the state of that input box will be persisted. Now, if you have a counter component and you navigate to the wrong tab or you click something you thought was a button, but it's actually a link and you go back, it's still there. I see chat's catching on already. Classic reverse portal, basic visibility. Oh my, is it Christmas or something, right? This is so good. It's so good. Now you can render an element and have it own its state without having to deal with all the chaos from local storage to conditional rendering to hiding via CSS to having the VDOM caring about it and taking priority from other things. If you have some slow thing you want to kick off the render for as soon as possible without blocking the main UI, you can just do it now. And as others are catching on to, React Router is going to have so much fun with this. Absolutely agree. Routers are going to be able to do crazy stuff with this for pre-rendering different routes so that not only do we know what HTML will be on the next page, we actually have the React structure for it done too. This makes routing, you can do crazy stuff with routing with this. I'm so excited. One major note they call out here before we go deeper, effects don't mount when an activity is hidden. So if you have a use effect in a component wrapped in an activity that's hidden, the use effect won't run. Its state will persist, but the effect will not run. If you switch an activity from visible to hidden, the effect will clean up. So you will still get that return cleanup function, but you will not have it run when it is inside of the activity. This is part of why it's so performant, why you can render giant things that are super heavy in activities, leave them hidden, and it won't meaningfully affect your performance. I love chat catching on to this. Perfect for transitions. God damn it, I have to start using React again. Not even pre-rendering, just instant browsing history stuff. Yes, it's so cool. So cool. So let's take a look at the examples they have. Restoring state with activity. When a user navigates away from a page, it's common to stop rendering the old page. Yes, this is how pretty much every router works in React. It's one of the reasons why we tell people to put their state in the URL, because they're going to lose it when you navigate otherwise. But as they say here, if the user goes back to the old page, the previous state is lost. So if home has an input field, the user leaves the page and the input gets unmounted, now the text they typed is gone. Activity lets you change the visibility of other things like that. So now home is visible if you're on /, otherwise it's hidden, so it's not rendered at all. But it does exist still, so its state is persisted. And here's the example. Let's search for a video. Let's type F. We go to 4th, and we go back, and it's still in this state. Do you know how annoying it was to do shit like this before? I see chat catching on, all caps from Cooper here. Persistent filters on dashboard without query params. Or Sporto, my hack for caching images in Roundest. Oh God, yeah, that is so much easier. You can just fetch the next image. God, that's so good. Damn, it's so good. Yet people are getting hyped. This is an awesome change. They called out hiding via CSS at the top. The problem with hiding with CSS is your browser still has to do a bunch of work to generate the HTML, put it in the page, then hide it. And it will affect other elements too. Not only is activity not using all of the browser stuff you would be using if you hid via CSS instead, it's also not even using all of React because it's disabling a bunch of things that don't need to be running if the component isn't actually there. So this doesn't run hooks until it's visible. Oh, it's so good. It's huge. You can just render all of your UI in activities, and when you activate it, it will come up way faster. The state will be persistent throughout all of it. I would love to see somebody do a shim on React Router that just wraps everything in activity just to see how it performs. I would be so curious to see. RAM usage go burr. I got all this RAM. I got to use it for something. I don't work with a lot of front end. Even I know this is OP. Yes. You're the ones I'm trying to win, by the way. If you guys don't know, my history is back end. I'm just trying to get you guys as excited about front end stuff as I am because I have my whole history is back end. I got into React relatively late. And I fell in love with all these cool things they were doing. And I'm just trying to share that love and excitement. And I'm pumped you guys are seeing it and getting it too. Do you see how elegantly this all combines? The transition between the different pages, the state being persisted, the animation as you type. And this isn't crazy custom JS like it would have had to be otherwise. This is just using built-in browser primitives and built-in core React stuff that's just simple component wrappers. It's so cool. Other frameworks previously did animation better than React. I won't pretend otherwise. It took them way too long to catch up, but I feel like they're leapfrogging. As long as you're not a Firefox user, cries and Zen. Yeah, it is what it is. Anyways, as I was hinting at, you can also pre-render using this too. So here we are pre-rendering certain pages like details 1 in order to have it render quicker. To read what they had to say, sometimes you might want to prepare the next part of the UI that a user is likely to use ahead of time, so it's ready by the time they are ready to use it. It's especially useful if the next route needs to suspend on data that it needs for render, because you can help ensure the data is already fetched before the user even navigates. For example, our app currently needs to suspend to load the data for each video when you select one. We can improve this by rendering all of the pages in a hidden activity until the user navigates. Here, we're mapping over all the videos and rendering them all in hidden activities. So now they can all fetch. So now when I go to one, it already has its data here. It doesn't have to wait because it can just do all that. And there's no crazy custom code being written here again. We hop into the details. Here we still have the suspense. The suspense can be resolved during an activity. So cool. Effects don't run, but data fetching through suspense boundaries does run. So here we have a use call for fetch video to get the video data. This triggers suspense when it's going. So the suspenseful activity can happen. The component can render and be ready without having to do anything in the DOM yet. And then you just render it. It's unreal. It's this simple. Like there's no crazy transition or animation code anywhere in here. You just wrap things in view transition and you're pretty much done. This is Facebook loves Relay all over again. It is. Facebook spends a lot of time trying to filter the best parts out of what makes Relay work for them so that we don't have to have a PhD in graph theory in order to get better performance of our web apps. It's like, this is 3 layers of distillation past Relay. We find these small benefits that we can then stack up with browser standards to make something everyone could benefit from. Okay, I know I said this isn't server components, but they do call them out here. SSR with activity. When using activity on a page that uses SSR, there are additional optimizations as well. If part of the page is rendered with mode hidden, then it will not be included in the SSR response. Instead, React will schedule a client render for the component inside that activity while the rest of the page hydrates, prioritizing the visible content on the screen. We have quick at home now, guys. We did it. We can now tell React to not do something on the server, not block the initial render, and then prioritize re-rendering it on client. This is so cool. It's so cool. And it's using the same primitive. You don't have some special do hydrate, don't hydrate. You just use activity the way you would intuitively do it for client-side stuff, and it works on the server too. This is why does React move slower than other frameworks? Yes. It's because they're trying to find the right core primitives that they can use to solve multiple problems at once when the problems are similar enough. And the problem of how to unblock the first byte on a server render, the problem of how to prioritize what to render on client, and the problem of how to render things in the background on client when they're not visible yet. These are all complex problems that intuitively you would expect to do different things for. But the genius of this team is they'll fight to find the overlap and build something that solves all these problems in one elegant way. And it's actually really cool. It's not always elegant. I mean, look at all the weird arguments for use effect, but sometimes it is, and this looks really elegant. I'm so excited to play with it. One of the coolest parts here. React deprioritizes hydration of content within an activity similar to how suspense content is hydrated at a lower priority. If the user interacts with the page, we'll prioritize hydration within the boundary if needed. We have quick at home. Future modes for activity. In the future, we may add more modes to activity. For example, a common use case is rendering a modal, where the previous inactive page is visible behind the active modal view. The hidden mode does not work for this use case because it's not visible and is not included in SSR. Instead, we're considering a new mode that would keep the content visible and included in SSR, but keep it unmounted and deprioritized for updates. This makes a lot of sense. When you have a full screen modal open, you don't need the background updating in full. I don't know how common this case is that it needs its own mode, but it's awesome they're thinking about real use cases like modals that block the content underneath. It took Chrome decades to start considering these things. So that's the end of the now ready to go experimental features that will almost certainly be making it into the main React version in the near future. Possibly React 20, possibly sooner. You never know with them. I'm going to play with them a bunch, but there's more here too that we need to dig into, including that IDE plugin. Again, they call out that they often change or remove solutions after trying them out. When the solutions that they're working on are shared too early, it can create churn and confusion in the community. To balance being transparent and limiting confusion, we're sharing the problems we're currently developing solutions for without sharing a particular solution that we have in mind. So these aren't things we can play with just yet, and they're not trying to promise a specific solution because they don't want to get too hyped. We don't want concurrent mode again. God, that was a disaster. So I don't think this will automatically start 150 fetches because it deprioritizes activity when there isn't availability. That's like the whole point, is it's optional. If there are too many things in activity, I am sure the React scheduler is smart enough to deprioritize all the things in a hidden activity. It might pick the wrong ones, but it will deprioritize them for sure. Curious to see how this looks at scale though. It'll be very fun to play with. Deprioritization means that if it doesn't do the thing and you just navigate there normally, it just behaves the way it did before. So if you have the RAM, the CPU, and network, and all the things necessary to do that, cool, you can do it. You can render those things. But if you have too much and other things take priority, like inputs, all of the other content on the page that isn't under an activity or isn't an activity that's visible, that will take it. More on this here. Another mode they're considering is the ability to automatically destroy state for hidden activities if there's too much memory being used. Since the component's already unmounted, it may be preferable to just destroy the state for the least recently used hidden parts of the app rather than consume too much resource. Yep, super cool. Anyways, let's go to these performance tools because we need more ways to identify performance. Our friend Aiden, you guys might know, creator of Same, but mostly known for Million.js and React Scan. You've seen React Scan in a bunch of my stuff. If you go to my like is React really slow video, one of my best videos I've done recently, you can see in depth the power of React Scan. He knows what he's doing. He has been building a lot of very useful performance tools for React. Now the React team is starting to catch up, which is very overdue and very exciting to see. Working on a new set of custom tracks to performance profilers using browser APIs that allow adding custom tracks to provide more information about the performance of your app. Feature is still in progress, so we're not ready to publish docs to fully release it as an experimental feature yet. You get a sneak preview when using experimental versions of React, which will automatically see the performance tracks added to profiles. So here we see custom tracks that you can define in the React code to say, hey, this is when this render starts. And it makes using the React performance stuff, both in the React Chrome extension and in the normal performance tab, significantly easier. This is work being done in parallel with the Chrome team to make the performance tab more useful, which is very needed because I've been spending a lot of time in this tab lately and it is rough. It's so useful and it's so bad and we need all the help we can get. It has some bugs, so it's not quite ready yet, and they're still collecting feedback. So if you do end up using this and you have feedback for them, definitely let them know. That's the whole point. That's why they're doing this. Another that I am so excited for. Hi, Solid.js. We're catching up finally. It only took us, 8 years? Automatic effect dependencies. When we released hooks, we had 3 motivations. Sharing code between components, thinking in terms of function, not in lifecycle, and supporting ahead-of-time compilation. The first 2 it did great with. The third it did not help with. Since their release, hooks have been successful at helping people share code between components. Hooks are now the favored way to share logic between components, and there are less use cases for render props and higher order components than there ever were before. Hooks have also been successful at supporting features like fast refresh that were not possible with traditional class components because of how deep the lifecycle was embedded in those components. Now it's a lot easier to do those types of things. I cannot imagine life without fast refresh anymore. It's so good just saving and seeing the change immediately without your state going away. Effects can be hard. No shit. Unfortunately, some hooks are still hard to think in terms of function instead of life cycles. Effects are a function that triggers on different things, but those things are the life cycle of your data rather than the life cycle of the component, even though it does still trigger on the component life cycle, like on unmounted one. It's confusing. It genuinely is. As they say here, effects specifically are still hard to understand, and it's one of the most common pain points that we hear from devs. Last year, we spent a significant amount of time researching how effects were actually being used and how those use cases could be simplified as well as made easier to understand. We found that often the confusion is from using an effect when you don't actually need to. The You Might Not Need an Effect guide covers many cases where effects are not the right solution. And this is if you haven't already read this blog post and you're a React dev, you're doing yourself a disservice. Read this post. It's phenomenal and it will help you so much with learning the places that you shouldn't actually be doing an effect for. This is a really common one. Combining something like first name and last name and an effect whenever either change, you set it to a new state, just inline it. It's so cheap to calculate this. Just do it during render. Who fucking cares? And this plus compiler means there's a lot of partial states you shouldn't be storing. As I say here, though, Even when an effect is the right fit for a problem, effects can still be harder to understand than class component lifecycles were in the past. We believe one of the reasons for confusion is that developers tend to think of effects from the component's perspective, like a lifecycle, instead of the effects point of view, which is the data and what the effect is actually doing. Here's an example. We create a connection, and then we connect the connection on room ID. And we return a disconnect when room ID changes. Because if the room ID changes, we want to disconnect from that room and connect to a new one. Many users would read this code as on mount, connect to the room ID. Whenever room ID changes, disconnect the old room and recreate the connection. But now you're still thinking from the component's perspective, which means you'll need to think of every component lifecycle state to write the effect correctly. This can be difficult, so it's understandable that effects seem harder than class lifecycles when you're viewing it from the component's perspective. I totally agree with this framing, by the way. I think one of the biggest problems people have with the React model is they're thinking about components too much and data flow too little. The beauty of hooks is that the lifecycle is no longer around the component. The lifecycle is instead now around the data being passed to the hook. I didn't think of this as functions versus components. I thought of this as data lifecycles versus component lifecycles. But I'm curious to see how they pitch it here. Effects without dependencies. Instead, it's better to think from the effects perspective. The effect doesn't know about the component lifecycles. It only describes how to start synchronization and how to stop it. When users think of effects in this way, their effects tend to be easier to write and more resilient to being started and stopped as many times as are needed. We spent some time researching why effects are thought of from the component perspective, and we think one of the reasons is the dependency array. Since you have to write it, it's right there and in your face, reminding you of what you're reacting to and baiting you into the mental model of do this when the value changes. When we released hooks, we knew we could make them easier to use with ahead of time compilation. With the React compiler, you're now able to avoid writing use callback and use memo yourself in most cases. For effects, the compiler can insert dependencies for you. So finally, for the first time ever, there will be a real use case for not passing an array to an effect, because right now it makes no sense at all. But in the future, finally, it might actually make some sense. With this code, the React compiler can infer the dependencies for you and insert them automatically, so you don't need to see or write them. With features like the IDE extension and use event effect, we can provide a code lens to show you when the compiler inserted 4 times that you need to debug, or to optimize by removing a dependency. This helps reinforce the correct mental model for writing effects, which can run at any time to synchronize your component or hook state when something else. Think of event effects similar to use callback, but it never changes. It's effectively the same thing as stuffing a function into a ref. You don't want the onVisit binding to change, because if it does, the effect will run again and you don't want it to. This lets you bind a function to whatever data the component has access to without having to trigger updates when you don't intend to. Super, super nice. And will allow you to avoid a lot of the depths being passed into the effect that shouldn't actually trigger the effect changing. Like here, we don't want number of items to trigger the effect. We only want the URL to. So we break out the effect event to use the visited URL and number of items. So we have this all here. And then we pass on visit to use effect just by calling it in there. No passing, it's just in the same closure. And now this doesn't run on number of items changes like it might have otherwise. Very nice. This took way too long to ship. I totally agree with you guys. It's still not even out properly yet, but I am so hyped that it's not going away. They are actually shipping it. There was another use effect thing they were considering doing that I saw them add and then remove. Use resource effect. The legend Lauren was working on this one. Use resource effect was going to be similar, but it would give you an object or data with a cleanup, which I've needed forever. I have an ancient thread of me going back and forth with Dan Abramov, trying to explain to him that sometimes I need to instantiate a thing and have a cleanup for it that doesn't run twice always. And it was so hard to communicate that with him. It's like, here are the 4 hooks I have to write right now. Here's the one I should have to. They kind of got it, never happened, but they're moving in that direction. They are adding the missing pieces to make effects simpler so that they're easier for us to understand and they are less likely to go rogue and destroy our code. And when you combine that with the IDE extension that we're about to get to, and it says, hey, you might not want this thing right here because this thing is going to cause this effect to run all the time. You might want to move this out to an event effect so that it is a function that gets called in the effect instead. So much better. As they say in the post, our hope is that automatically inserting dependencies is not only easier to write, but that it makes them easier to understand by forcing you to think in terms of what the effect does and not in the component life cycles. I am so hyped for this change. I've been dancing around it for so long. We need to look into the IDE extension. The React compiler is now in RC. It's kind of funny, the RC, but React compiler is pretty ready to go. They're using it for basically everything now at Meta and Facebook. I'm using it for T3 chat. It's been a lifesaver for us. And they're working hard towards shipping the first semver stable version of the compiler in coming months. Huge. So hyped. That compiler is going to officially be 1.0 semver stable. Their bar for stable is really high, so know that. But I'm using it on everything I build right now, and it's been so good. But part of the compiler efforts isn't just, it can make your React code faster. It's how it integrates the whole ecosystem in a better way. One of those ways is your IDE. We've begun exploring ways to use the React compiler to provide information that can improve understanding and debugging of your code. One idea we started exploring is a new experimental LSP-based React IDE extension powered by the React compiler, similar to the one used in Lauren's talk at ReactConf.
But this essentially shows you what the compiler has compiled. So one way to tell if a component or hook was optimized by the compiler is to look for this little $sign variable up top. And don't worry about how to use this. It's not meant to be used directly. It's really just for the compiler. So one way you can think about this is it's just a big array of values that the compiler can use to cache and retrieve values efficiently.
This is so cool. One of the biggest concerns I saw people have with compiler is that it makes it so people don't understand the code going out. I think most devs don't even understand the code going in. They're just auto-completing anyways, and they don't understand React well enough to have understood how to optimize and memoize properly anyways. So for them, it's a no-op. They just spit out better code. But for those who care deeply, the people who watch a channel like this and are trying to teach the teams they work with how to actually use React, this is huge for us because we can see what comes out of the React component. It becomes way easier to understand how the compiler works and see how it interfaces with the other things you're doing if you can just hover over and see the compiler output. But the extension is going to go so much further than what we're seeing here. I don't remember if there's other deeper examples of it in here or not. Oh, here's a fun one. The React compiler ESLint rules are way better. The current property on a ref cannot be accessed during the render body. This is just an early preview of what Lauren's been working on. She is an absolute wizard, by the way, if you guys aren't familiar with her work. Also, one of the funniest people you could follow on Twitter. Potatoes, spelt like that. Yeah, super underrated. Forgive and forget is such a good pun with React compiler because it used to be React forget. RC is release candidate. This is not the React compiler RC. She can't help herself. She's a memer. We love Lauren. Anyways, back to the IDE extension, because we've talked a bit about what she has in mind here, and it's really cool. Our idea is that we can use the compiler static analysis to provide more info, suggestions, and optimization opportunities directly in your IDE. For example, we can provide diagnostics for code breaking the rules of React, hover to show if a component and hook are optimized by the compiler or not, or even a code lens to see automatically inserted effect dependencies. The IDE extension is still in early exploration, but we'll share our progress in future updates. The code lens for the automatic effect dependencies is so cool. Like similar to what languages do this? I know Rust does this with the LSP, where you type something and it like has like the gray text behind showing you what it actually is and does. Or like with GitHub and the Git lens plugin here, you can see the gray text there showing this is when I tried to fix Gemini's behaviors. Having that to show you what dependencies an effect has instead of you writing them all, that's so cool. I'm hyped. It's going to be a huge win for all the changes going into React, and it's awesome to see the React team thinking more holistically, more and more. Like React went from a JS library you'd add to change how you update your UI to a suite of tools to build giant applications for teams of all sizes. And the IDE integration is another great example of that, where the code we're writing isn't going to change a whole lot, but the quality of experience we have writing it is just increasing constantly. And I think more and more we're going to see this is the focus of React, not what new APIs can we introduce, what new ways of writing React can we think of. I don't think we'll ever have another hooks moment where they fundamentally change the syntax of React itself. Instead, we're going to see things that remove syntax that probably shouldn't have been there in the first place to make the code as simple as possible so humans and AI can work together in tandem to ship things more effectively. Yes, I had to mention AI somewhere here. I made it this far, okay? Anyways, a couple more cool things they have before we wrap up. Fragment refs. Many DOM APIs, like those for things like event management, positioning, and focus, are difficult to compose when writing with React. This often leads to devs reaching for effects, managing multiple refs, or using APIs like find DOM node. Been there, done that. Please never make me do it again. We're exploring adding refs to fragments that would point to a group of DOM elements rather than just a single element. Our hope is that this will simplify managing multiple children and make it easier to write composable React code without having to call a bunch of random DOM APIs. Fragment refs are still being researched. We'll share more info when we're closer to having a final API. Very exciting. I can use that a lot in T3 chat for managing input fields. Speaking of things I could use for T3 chat, gesture animations. Oh, finally. We're researching ways to enhance view transitions to support gesture animations like swiping to open a menu or scrolling through a photo carousel. Shout out Ken Wheeler. If you know, you know. Gestures present a new challenge for a few reasons. Gestures are continuous. As you swipe, the animation is tied to your finger's placement in time, rather than triggering and running to completion. React isn't good at this. React isn't good at partials. React takes a before and after and handles the in-between for you efficiently. It's not as good at things that change every frame. That's not what React does. React says, go use CSS for that. But gestures require that, and finding the right balance here is going to be really challenging. And I like that they're not pretending it isn't. As they said, they're continuous. They don't complete. It's not as simple as it's starting and it's done. When you release your finger, gesture animations can run to completion or revert to their original state, like when you only partially opened a menu, depending on how far you go. That's complex, and React's model does not map well to that. There's also gestures inverting old and new. When you're animating, you want the page you are animating from to stay alive and interactive. This inverts the browser view transition model, where the old state's a snapshot and the new state is the live DOM. Having an old state that's still alive makes this way more complex. Sympathy to them. I hope they can figure out how to do this. We believe we found an approach that works well and may introduce a new API for triggering gesture transitions. For now, we're focused on shipping view transition, and we'll revisit gestures afterwards. Speaking of transitions, hi Miles. He's been extra needy. I just did 2 trips, so he's not gotten the attention he wants. So he's just asking for it constantly. Shoulder time? Come on. I just trimmed his nails, so they're a little shorter than usual, so he's a little nervous climbing me right now. But shoulder's his favorite spot. Hey, buddy, I know. I know. We'll hang more soon, I promise, but I need to finish filming. Is that okay? Okay, we'll finish the video with him on my shoulder. What's left? Concurrent stores. When we released React 18 with concurrent rendering, we also released useSync external store, one of the coolest and also most broken APIs in React. It does not handle concurrent rendering at all. They can support it, but they do it by forcing a sync render whenever the store updates. This is cool, except for the fact that it breaks things like transitions entirely. So if you're using a library heavily relying on sync external store, good luck, have fun. Okay, Cat is leaving. Be right back. As we were saying, sync external store breaks suspense and a bunch of the other fun new concurrent features. So if you're using a library with it, it breaks other things. I know it's one of the biggest frustrations that people like Tanner Lindsley have with React in its current state. And they're finally revisiting the problem space to create a primitive to fully support concurrent external stores with the use API. So you can call use store and implement a store in a way that is friendly to React's concurrency, suspense, and all these other cool things that the third-party devs making React so cool all really want access to. This might be the shortest, simplest section here, but it's one of the most important and shows to a lot of like the core people building around React that we will have the missing pieces to do the next era of dev tools very soon. And things like React Query are going to get so much better when this all finally ships. I am so hyped with all the cool things coming to React. I missed these labs posts so much, and it's incredible having them back. Shout out to Ricky for letting me know this was coming a little bit early so I could prepare accordingly. By a little early, I mean yesterday, literally just one day, but so nice. Every day I feel more like the React team is trying to bridge the gap between it and the community, despite the community growing to unbelievable sizes. And I still think, as I tend to, that the future of React's incredibly bright. Let me know what you guys think. Until next time, peace, nerds.